Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday. It is May 12th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And really, this was another, even though we have a really strong trend down here, this was not an easy day to trade. It got a little easier here in the late morning, but other than that, we had some stuff early on, and then this was just hard to trade. I mean, we were in this green channel, so you can't really be going short down here, and you just don't really get any good setups here. And then you got to be careful going short in here. I marked a couple of them once it was obvious this channel was here. But until you really get this channel confirmed, it's kind of hard to trade this right into that support. So you got to be careful, make sure you got enough room to get out. Once it was clear we were going lower again, when we came back to the trend line, we got a break. So you still got a couple of chances to short, and then there's a bunch of green ones in here because we're just kind of going sideways. We're back in another range, so to speak. So anyway, I'm going to back out. We'll go through the trades. But again, I would classify this as a more difficult day because you don't just get the straight down stuff you usually get with a really strong sell-off like this. You get some really strong moves, but then you get all this uncertainty. I mean, when you're going sideways like that, it's really uncertain. And when you hit these strong support areas, it's really uncertain if we're going to go lower or not. One thing for sure is we had the first leg down right here. And if you measure that and just bring it over, you can see a measured leg down. And you can see where that went to. I mean, that's where we started to go sideways. We went a little bit lower than that in the end. But you can see once we reached that level, we went sideways for several hours there, a couple of hours, multiple hours actually, 2 or 3 hours. So that would have been a great target. And this thing, when it broke lower here, went straight to that target before bouncing. I mean, notice it bounces almost on the tick. So it would have given you a great target. You actually could have got more out of it than that, but there's not really a setup here to take advantage of that. But let's back out. We'll go through the trades. Hopefully it won't take that long. There's not that many of them, even though it's a big day with a lot of price action. It may take a little longer to get through all this, but there's not a lot of trades here. So when we came in, we were just really going sideways. You can clearly see the EMA, but there's a clear trend down here that was already in process that you could have found as soon as you came in. And we get that break right here, and notice there's a new low. Let me back out here a little more. There's a new low, and then you get a first entry when it breaks lower there, and you also get a close outside that little micro trend, and we move to a new high. When it breaks below that bar right there, that's a second entry short. I like that trade just because we've been trending down, and we're probably going to go make a new low. And you don't know this is coming. There is a news item at this, right at this level. You can see it up here. It was a CPI, core CPI. And it is red. Generally, I don't pay as much attention to that, but sometimes you can get some big movement out of that, like so. So if you're sitting on the sidelines because of that, you probably can't take this trade, unfortunately. So, but the price action is still right, as you can see. You got your break, move to a new low, and then we're trending back the other way. It looks like it's going to be a range, actually. And you can see this trend, you get a little spike up. We were way overdone, so it spikes up, goes into this channel, you get a break, move to a new high, and then we just kind of correcting sideways here after that. So, but everything's still playing out to the tick here. And we actually bounce. That's your overnight lows. And you get a first entry and a second entry right at the key, right at the EMA, right at the midline. With a big move like that, you would expect we would test these lows. Are they going to do it right now? Well, you don't know that, but because of that big move and the fact that this is a second entry right off the EMA and the midline, I like taking that trade. It's good for an easy scalp. You don't get much more out of that. Actually, Actually, that's bigger than you probably think it is. So that's almost 5 points. So it doesn't look like it, but it is because there's just so much movement today. So yeah, you could have gotten 3 or 4 points of runners out of that. So it doesn't look like much, but it's a pretty good move. Then of course you got a double bottom right here, and you get a first entry, second entry. I was a little afraid of that second entry. You could go ahead and take that trade. The reason I didn't mark it is because it's an inside bar and they're unreliable, so it doesn't really qualify for an entry. But if you took it, I probably wouldn't beat you up over it. It is the second entry, right at the key entry point. It is a fairly bearish bar. It would have worked. There's enough room back to the EMA, but I liked going long here because we had this huge overshoot, so you would expect us to get a break. So when this second entry short bounces off this possible scalp spike in channel trend line right here, we're probably going higher. And there is a little bit of room back to the trend line. So it wasn't that you should have been out of that pretty quick. It went on higher, but I doubt you would have got anything out of that. So, and that trend line continues. You can't enter in this stuff right here. So, and then of course we get the break, 2 legs down. Unfortunately, you don't get a very good signal bar here. If you had a good signal bar, I'd say go long. It's a second entry. It's the first break of this spiking channel here. There's a triple test. It's just not a very good signal bar. There's a high or low right here, but this is looking really congestive because you got that big bar and then these are all inside of it. 1, 2, 3, 4 bars stacked up. You're looking for prices to make a new high. If you wanted to be really aggressive, you might take that trade, but I don't like it. Too many times that'll fail on you and it'll run down here and bounce again and then go up. So the little trend micro channel coming down had played out, as you can see, but it's real iffy. It's hard to say. You got to close outside there, but that's not convincing. So you could come lower again, and that's the issue. But we do go higher, and then you're working lower again. There's a lower high right here, but again, that's congestion. You got a bunch of bars stacked up. You got at least 3, one with nobody. That's very tempting, and it works, but it's right in the middle of what's looking like a range here. I've actually adjusted this some. At this point, this didn't, you can see things starting to go sideways, but really, there's still a downward bias at this point. So that's another one. If you took it, knowing that it's aggressive and you want to take it, but that one will fail a lot of times. It worked. I'm just not crazy about it. And then we're just kind of chopping around down here. You really don't want to go short into this support, and you don't really want to go long into the EMA. And so you're really just kind of stuck there. Prices are just kind of meandering along. We do jump up, and finally you get a second entry long. And we did confirm this trend line right here, but it's not a very good, it's just a first. Actually, you could count this as a second entry because you break higher, but that looks like one leg down to me. And I'm not crazy about it for that reason. I think you need to wait on a higher low or a second entry, and you get both right here. So I like entering right there, and you get that next leg up. And you can clearly see you get two measured legs basically to the tick almost. And where do we turn down? Right at the top of the channel, come back. But again, you don't get a setup. And now you've got this resistance here. You made a little higher high and then a little lower high. And really, early at that point, I was looking at this much lower here. So you've had some consistent resistance there. So that's how I kind of shifted this line up a little later. Actually, I shifted it up to right there. But at the time, I had it a little lower. So this looked like a failed break with a lower high. And so I like to go in short right there. And it is a second entry short too. There's a little break lower there. So it's a first entry, second entry. And you got enough room back to the EMA. with all that resistance. I liked that one. And of course you shoot right through, you come back, first entry, second entry. You don't get a very good setup there, which saves you from a loss. And there's a reversal here, but it's below the EMA, and we haven't made a new low, so I don't think you want to go long. Even though it works and shoots right back up, it's just not a very good setup. It's tempting to go short right here, and if you did, that's another one. It's aggressive because you got this channel up. It's the first close outside. There's a good chance you could break higher. And notice we try, they just can't do it. So, and it broke lower first before it tries to trade back up here again. So it's a little dangerous, but that's another one. Again, if you took it, there's some reasons, but it's aggressive. And then we come down, you get a first entry, second entry right here off the trend line, but it's too bullish a bar. There's a lower high here, but now you're right into support. You could look at this as a failed second entry long. It breaks higher and turns down, but when you go short, you're going short right into all that support across there. Of course, it works, but I just don't think it's risking it. Too congestive here. And then, of course, now you're down here testing the overnight lows, so you probably expect a failed breakout. You need to wait on a higher low here, which comes here, but you've already been back to the EMA. Again, there's a reversal here, but it's below the EMA. I just don't think it's worth taking. It would have worked, and then you're just chopping sideways. No setups here. I don't think you want to go long on that. Then by the time you see there's a channel here, you don't have enough room to get out there, and you see you would have lost if you took it. We break out of here, we come back and test it and go lower, but you just can't go short into those overnight lows. And this is a good example why, because if you'd have went short down in here, even though that's very tempting, this is what happens. It bounces on you. It ends up going lower, but you can't ride these big moves out because eventually sometimes they don't come back, and so you can't risk that. And of course we turn down here. There's no reason to go short yet. You're a little ways away from the EMA, but you'd need a lower high here, and you don't get it. And this trend line has not been confirmed. That's just the first two swings. So we head on lower again. No chance to get in that. And we finally push a little below. Actually, these are not the overnight lows. That's just where the recent support had been. The overnight lows are down here, so I probably confused you there. We come back and test it. So you would figure that's where we're headed, to the overnight lows. And of course we do bounce down here, but again, you don't really get a chance to go. This actually broke lower and turned up and went higher. If you took that far away from the EMA on a failed breakout, that's a possibility. Or really, it's not even a failed breakout. It's just a test of the overnight supply, the overnight lows. So if you took that trade, you're probably okay out. I wouldn't take these right into the EMA, and this is why, because it turns back down, and next thing you know, we're turning down off this trend line. Unfortunately, again, you don't get a very good signal bar here. And then we finally break lower below the overnight lows, and this turns out to be a failure. You come back and make a higher low here, but it's right into the overnight lows. You could look at this as a failure when it broke higher. But we're not finding support yet on the other side. There's too big a chance prices are going to pull back, so I wouldn't go long there. And you can see it's not long before they pull back and try to test that level again before going higher. And you get the break of this channel, couple of legs up, but again, you just don't get a setup. You finally get a second entry short here. Notice the new low. You come back. It moves down. Technically, this is not a second entry short. It's just a first entry. But you got a double top up here. First entry, second entry. It's a second entry long that breaks higher and fails and turns down. It is right into the support, but the fact that it's confirming that trend line, and you've got this big yellow channel, and that's probably close enough to say, hey, maybe we didn't quite draw this steep enough. And I ended up leaving it where I had it because we did turn down off of it right there. We came back. So it looks like it actually did come up short, sell off, and then come back to test it before. Then you can see people really jump in. So I doubt I'm the only one that read it that way. But it didn't matter. There's not a setup there regardless. So not a good enough signal bar, but it shoots lower, turns up. And so now you got a failed second entry long, and it actually breaks higher and turns down. It's a failure when it breaks lower right there. And it does confirm that trend line. And that's a nice entry. And I only like that one because it is a trap, and we have traded back below that line a few times already. And notice we're not getting any rejection here. This looks like acceptance. And so we're probably going to go lower. They probably trapped the longs right there. And that's a quick, easy move on a trap. And then first entry, second entry, right off the key entry point, nice bearish bar way away from the EMA, plenty of room back to the possible support, although we've breached that a couple of times now. You still need to be wary of it, so just something to think about. But that's a second entry short, and that's the trade of the late morning really right there, and this thing just takes off. And you actually get a second entry short right here, but you don't get a good enough signal bar, and that saves you from a loss before it actually goes down. So, I mean, some good examples of why you want to follow the rules today, because this is what happens to you. And we head on down, and where do we bounce? Right off the lows. And all you're doing is just getting you kind of find the midline right in there, and you can see we're bouncing right off of it, and you just try to get an equal distance. You may not have found this low until here. You might have been looking at it in a different spot and had to adjust it when it made this low, but you can quickly see that it fits there. Notice we bounced off the midline, then we pushed through it, came back and tested it and went lower. We turned down off of it there. We tested it there, tested it again there, came back and tested it. So it's pretty obvious that's the midline. So you had this move now. You just don't get anything right in here. Then you bounce. And there's actually a second entry here, but this tight channel is still in play. So I'd be leery of it. But then we kind of get the new high and the break all in one, way away from the EMA. And you've got 1, 2. This is actually a triple test here. But this is why you want to a lot of times wait, because if you'd have went short right here, I don't know if that would have worked or not. I don't think it would have. Well, looks like it would have worked after all. So notice, well, no, you only get 5 ticks there, so you probably get a 4-tick failure on that, unless you entered with a limit order and got a little better entry. So again, I'd wait on the break, close outside the new high, which comes here. And now you got a clear triple test, bearish bar, way away from the EMA. That's the better place to enter. It does look a little congestive here, so you got that to worry with, but it really looks like a high, a pullback, and a higher high, and then turning down. And you can see they weren't satisfied with that, and they came back and tested a couple of more times, and it actually broke higher once. So you got a lower high there, and then you got a double top and a lower high again, and it breaks higher first and turns down. So you're probably going to have some trap traders. So when it breaks lower in there, you're probably going to scalp out of that at a minimum. It turns out to be a pretty good move. Then we bounce again. You would expect prices are probably going over here, so you really need a trap of some kind or some kind of strong resistance, which you got plenty of resistance there. You just need to make sure it's a good setup. And then, of course, we bounce off the lows and we work back. Break higher. We actually get outside the yellow trend line here. I don't think this does break higher and turn down, but I don't think you want to risk, and it does look like an overshoot, but I don't think you want to risk that. Wait on a lower high, which comes here, and no setup, but then you try to go higher again, and it breaks higher and fails and turns down. Plenty of room back to the EMA. Plenty of room back to this trend line, the support, the resistance that may act as support. You got plenty of room there, and it takes it a minute, but it just keeps going, which is what you would expect, a failed breakout here. I mean, we were inside that resistance for quite a while, so you would expect it to break out. Plus, you got the yellow two-tier channel that's been working down most of the morning, and that's the first break outside of it as well. And this turns out to be, I don't think I'd wait till down here to enter this one. When it broke higher and turned down on that engulfing bar, you know, if you're good enough chart reader that you trust yourself on engulfing bars, that's a good one to enter on. I don't recommend those for newer chart readers because they make too many mistakes on them. So it's probably a little more advanced trade. But if you catch that, you probably don't get a runner because it does if you use the break even stop, because it does come back. But if you might could have got a runner out of that. And then of course it bounces down here. Notice the channel working now. We do get a close outside and a couple of legs down, and it bounces right at that previous support, long way away from the EMA. We're going to probably snap back here. This is aggressive, so I'm hesitant to mark these, but this is almost, I mean, this is, you know, you're almost guaranteed to go back to the EMA here, but a lot of times it will break higher, stop you out, and then go exactly where you think. So you got to be careful with those, and that's why it's marked green. And we do run up back to the trend line. We still haven't made a new low yet. That's the thing, because here's the low before we got the break. So it wouldn't be surprising for prices to continue to try to work lower. There's just strong support here. And again, we break higher and turn down and go out the other side, but you could go short right below that, one tick below that bar as well. And our hope is we go on down and make a new low this time. But again, we fell out the bottom, pull back. There's a higher low here, but now you're getting too close to the trend line. You're right into the EMA. Of course, it works, but you definitely don't want to go short in here. So, but once it pushes on through, and notice you had this high of this bar, then you come back once, twice, 3 times, and then 4 times. So you really get kind of a double test there and a bearish bar, and it looks like 2 legs back to the EMA as well. Technically we make a lower high, lower low here, but it's still 2 legs back and multiple tests there. And notice this one's kind of interesting. I still made this green because it's aggressive. But notice you got the previous support line that's now acting as resistance. You got this resistance working across there, and you got the EMA, and we closed below. Even though we shot up through there, they beat it down and we closed below all of them. That's a good sign that we're going to go back and at least test the lows. So that's why I like that one for an aggressive entry, but it's aggressive. So, and then you can see we're just clearly in a channel here. And then you get another break lower, and we're probably going to trade back inside the range, at least back to the EMA, probably back to the highs. So that's another one you may risk. And then you get a failure here, but notice we've had a break now, and we've had the break and 2 legs down to a new low. Oops. Almost to the tick. So that's another reason I like going long there on that failed breakout. And then you get a first entry, second entry. You actually could have traded that second entry, but after making that measured leg and the break and 2 legs, multiple legs down to a new low, I don't think I would trust that. The only reason that maybe you might is because we haven't broken out of this and closed outside of it yet, and we've been trading across there for a little while, 30 minutes or so. So we're probably going to at least come back to the EMA, and you would expect we might even come back down to here. So that's another one you could argue to maybe take. But when it reverses real quick right there, you could go long. This is a relatively big bar. There's 16 ticks there, so it's a little large bar, but it takes off. And then we kind of go into another range here. But notice you got a double bottom, first entry, and then second entry. And when it broke higher right here above this bar, even though it makes a third entry, short, it's still a failed second entry when it breaks above here. It's a little bit congestive by that time, but we're finding support here. And what you might do is let it break higher there, drop a limit order a few ticks back, just to make sure you got room to get out before here. And if you can do that, maybe take that trade, because now we got a little range. I don't have it drawn, but let me just put it on here. I mean, hopefully you can see that. The key is you got to have enough room to get out before here, because you don't want to go long right into that resistance. So you let that break higher, drop a limit order far enough back here where you got an extra tick or two. And if you can get filled on that, take it. If you can't, let it go. Then, of course, we run back up here. And look how far away we are from the EMA. Notice this little channel working up. You get the break, this huge move up. And this was the original resistance across here, and we turned down right off of it. So for that reason, I like, if you want to be aggressive, I like that trade, because we're way away from the EMA and probably going to come back. You don't know if we're going to actually turn down and make this big move down here, but you would expect prices here to come back to the EMA. Maybe even back down to here, which they do, but I wouldn't be buying that right there with that channel working down, because that's what will happen to you. So, and that got us into 2 o'clock. So, yeah, almost a 30-minute chart lesson, even though there's not as many trades. It just takes a little while to talk through all this stuff. And I like to keep the chart lessons around 15 minutes, 20 minutes top. But days like this, it's just hard. And I know some of you don't mind them being longer, but I like to keep them shorter. It's easier for me. By the time I get to the end of one of these chart lessons, late in the afternoon after trading all day too, I'm just ready to close the chart up, to be honest with you. So it's harder on me. So anyway, interesting day. The price action the last few days has been difficult, to say the least. Today was a little better because at least we had a downtrend. We had a key entry point with some turn downs off of them. But so it wasn't quite as bad as yesterday when you're way up here and then way down here, then way back up here. You know, look how your highs and lows are all in different places, and you're just going inside. Those are difficult days to trade. You know, you want your ranges to be consistent, where they turn down consistently off the same highs or consistently off the same lows, that kind of thing. So, and that didn't happen yesterday. So that was a pretty difficult day. Today we at least had a key entry point with some trades off it. You've got some clear micro channels and micro ranges and things like that. So it was a little easier. There's a few more trades today than there were yesterday. But again, not the easiest day to trade. So if you're having difficulty finding entries and you're a fairly new chart reader, well, or if you're getting tricked a lot on days like this, if you've just started going live and you're not real experienced with these kind of days, you might just sit on the sidelines and wait. Sit this day out. Go play golf. Go walk your dog. Go play with your kids. Whatever you do with your, go fishing, you know, go bowling. Whatever you like to do in your spare time, go do it. Because sometimes it's better off than sitting here on a difficult day when you're not a really good chart reader, because this is a hard day for even me, somebody that's experienced at reading the chart. It's just difficult because it's not consistent. I mean, we're sideways and then we're down, and even the down stuff has got sideways stuff in it. And, you know, you're just not getting a lot of key entry points or key entry point entries. So just keep that in mind. But I'm going to wrap it up before we get over 30 minutes here. This is Mike with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.